This much is clear. We're living in unprecedented political times. But what that actually means is a little less clear. So if you're anything like me, whiling away the hours watching social media videos of dumpster fires while my own dumpster burns just outside my window, you might have some questions. Are the times really so unprecedented? Whose job is it to figure that out? Is there any way we can get a handle on what's going on out there? Well, luckily, you're not the only one who's wondering. There's a whole academic field of people who are asking those questions and lots more, trying to figure out why politics is like this. And they've got a lot to say about our unprecedented times. Hi, I'm Erica Brzozowski. This is Study Hall, and here are 5 of your questions about political science and the current state of the world answered. But before we get to our unprecedented times, let's talk about how we can understand them. Political science is a study of government and politics in theory and practice at the local, state, national, and international levels. Unfortunately, it can't totally explain why we have a government unit named after a meme, but it can help answer a lot of other questions. Why do countries fight wars? How can different political parties work together? How are government and economy connected? What do governments owe their citizens? People have been asking these kinds of questions for a long time. And political scientists try to answer them by breaking down those big questions into smaller, more specific ones. Like, how does nonviolence work as a political strategy? How does voter redistricting protect incumbents? And how does social media influence voters? Then they gather tons of data from all different kinds of measurements. They do surveys and experiments and case studies and ethnographies and use what they find to run data analyses and make mathematical models that explain, at least kind of, what the hell is going on around here. Political scientists work in all kinds of fields, from politics and government to law to media to education. Lots of them are even on social media if you look between all the dumpster fires. And in all those arenas, they're working to understand how, why, and how well governments actually work, which can be really complicated questions. If you're interested in learning more about that, we want to remind you all about the study hall courses like Power in Politics and U.S. Government that can jumpstart or restart your college and career journey right here on YouTube. Here's how it works. Watch any of the course videos on the Study Hall channel for free, then sign up for an online college course led by ASU faculty for just $25 and apply what you've learned. If at the end of the course you're happy with your grade, pay a fee that's about 1/3 of the cost of a college course to get 3 transferable college credits for your transcript. Whether you're building new skills, trying to earn college credit, or just proving to yourself that you can do it, Study Hall can help you reach your goals without the financial risk. Check out the link in the description or go to gostudyhall.com to learn more. Now back to political science. Understanding how governments do government is hard. There are around 200 independent national governments in the world and untold state and local ones, and all of them operate differently. They have different power structures, different economies, and different ideas about wealth, equality, and justice. But between all those differences, they're also doing some stuff in the same general ways. Like, national governments typically have both domestic and foreign policy. These things are catnip to political scientists. Domestic policy is what governs life inside a country. It's all the decisions the government makes that affect that country's residents. That includes stuff like distributive policy, which distributes taxpayer-funded stuff like public education and roads. Redistributive policy decides how much of one group's resources can be redistributed to a different group, like people living in poverty who need houses and food, or billionaires who need to pay more taxes. Regulatory policy decides stuff like how people and groups should behave and use resources, whether that's limiting the price of electricity or creating safety requirements in a workplace. And constituent policy creates organizations to enforce laws and manage public services, like Social Security and Medicare. Foreign policy, on the other hand, governs how a country relates to other countries. Political scientists study it as a part of a field called international relations, and it includes stuff like imperialism, where one country exerts political or economic control over another one. Diplomacy, where different countries try to work together peacefully. And collective security, where countries agree to work together as allies to protect their common interests, forming organizations like NATO and the United Nations. But even that can't explain everything about how governments work. Political scientists also study public administration, which is all about how they make the political sausage, if you will. If domestic policies has fixed this bridge, it's public administration that closes the road, hires the workers, and makes sure the new bridge is all up to scratch. Those 3 categories, domestic policy, international relations, and public administration, make up a big chunk of what political science is all about. They help us understand how governments work and why they are the way they are. What political scientists don't do, for the most part, is tell us how governments should work or which ones are doing their job best. Though, like everyone else on social media, they probably have some ideas about that. There is a field called comparative politics that studies the differences, similarities, strengths, and weaknesses of different political values and government structures. But even here, the idea isn't necessarily to make value judgments about different styles of government. Instead, lots of political scientists organize their comparative arguments around how well governments provide their citizens with things like order, equality, freedom, economic security, and well-being, which a lot of us will agree are pretty valuable. Other political scientists try to understand why different places and people groups develop these different governments in the first place. And still others want to use what they learn to make big generalizations about how people, politics, and governments work all over the world. Which might seem like a tall order, but a lot of these political comparisons do boil down to some of the basic universal conflicts in government, like the battles between democracy and authoritarianism, equality and hierarchy, and progress and tradition that people have been fighting for a long time. And those basic battles tell us a lot about all the dumpster fires we're seeing these days. Like, one of the fundamental ways that political scientists understand different government structures is through the distinction between political left and right, which is something you've definitely heard about on social media. And that distinction goes way back. In 1789, the French National Assembly met in Versailles to, figure out the French Revolution. The people who supported the revolution and its values tended to huddle up on the left side of the assembly, while the people who supported the monarchy grouped themselves on the right. That was the start of a centuries-long political tradition that associates left with those French revolutionary values of social, political, and economic equality, and right with the monarchical values of tradition and hierarchy. And that tradition shows up in different ways around the world. Like in the US, we mostly associate left with the Democratic Party and right with the Republican Party. And since we just have those two holding the most political power, we end up with these big behemoths trying to represent everyone's interests. But in other parts of the world, the left-right spectrum is more of a spectrum. Parliamentary governments like they have in places like Canada, Sweden, and New Zealand tend to have more political parties with leverage. For example, Sweden has 8 major political parties across the left-right spectrum. The Sweden Democrats are on the far right, and the appropriately named Left Party is on the left. Everyone else, including the Social Democrats, the moderates, and of course the Center Party, falls somewhere in between. Left versus right isn't the only way we think about politics, but political scientists have held on to it because it really can explain a lot. From economic conflicts about free markets and social welfare to cultural conflicts about abortion or gay marriage. Generally, right-wingers want to respect the traditions of history, while left-wingers want to bend its long arc toward justice. But these days, if you know one thing about the left and the right, especially in the US, it's probably that they are diametrically, categorically opposed to one another. That's because people all over the world have big feelings about the left and the right. And it's not necessarily because of their political platforms. Instead, the left and right become attached to social identities like being queer or being rural or being working class. So these days, political scientists are starting to think of political disagreement in the US in terms of feelings rather than policies, which changes how we have to think about political science. Because suddenly, we're hardly fighting about politics anymore, but somehow we're also getting jerked around by this unprecedented polarization. But wait a second, is it really so unprecedented? We spent this whole episode talking about how these kinds of political conflicts have been around forever. But people sure love to talk about how the turmoil we're seeing right now is like nothing anyone has ever seen before. Political science tells us that that's not all true. Contentious elections aren't new, and neither are pandemics, or inflation, or conflicts over how much the federal government should fund things. Neither is the bitter struggle for the human rights of indigenous people, people of color, and other marginalized people around the world. And the idea of living in unprecedented times, that's actually super precedented. 9/11, the Cuban Missile Crisis, Vietnam, World War II, nobody had ever seen anything like those before. If there's one thing we can learn from political science, is that bizarre, terrifying things have been happening constantly all throughout the history of the world. But there are some things about our times right now that are genuinely pretty whack. Like the impacts of climate change, those are totally unprecedented. So is the recent rise of AI, the role of social media in politics, and the wild amount of misinformation and biased journalism we get from the internet. Political scientists keep an eye on all that stuff, trying to make sense of what's actually going on around here. They also keep an eye on the really big stuff, worldwide trends in politics and economics that kind of let us know how everything's going. And in the last couple decades, they found something kind of unprecedented there too. It's part of that long-standing conflict between democracy, where the people of a country are in charge of its government, and authoritarianism, where a single person or group of people make all the calls. As the Cold War ended, democracy was on a hot streak, with tons of countries around the world building more people-ruled systems and institutions. But around the mid-2000s, authoritarianism came back for another round. Since then, countries around the world have been undergoing something called democratic backsliding, where the democratic pieces of their political institutions get slowly whittled away and replaced with more authoritarian ones. It's happened in all different parts of the world. Brazil, Ghana, Hungary, Israel, and even the US was downgraded in 2017 from a true democracy to a flawed one on a democracy index that ranks countries according to things like their electoral processes and the political participation of citizens. Precedented or not, all this stuff is definitely impacting countries, governments, policies, laws, and all of us in really interesting ways. And political scientists are the ones watching, analyzing, and explaining it all. So if you're sick of stress crocheting while you wonder which of the people on your phone are telling you the truth, it might be a good time to get into political science and start finding the answers to the questions we all have. If enough smart people work together on it, maybe we can all do a better job of understanding, explaining, and figuring out what to do about both the precedented and unprecedented parts of our times. And then we can get to work on all those dumpster fires. If you're currently in or thinking about going to college, check out our channel where you'll find more tips about navigating college applications and choosing a major. To find out how to earn college credit with Study Hall, go to gostudyhall.com or click on the link in the description. And if you want to help us out, give this video a like, comment your biggest political science question, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. See you next time.